ועכשיו, פרספקטיבה מדור קצת אחר. אני שמח להזמין אורח מכובד, לארי קינג, אחד העיתונאים המפורסמים בעולם ולא פחות מסמל אמריקאי, שמצטרף לשיחה עם גיל רוזן על חדשנות ועל המקום שלה בחיים שלנו, ובפרט בישראל.
What do Viber, ווייז, Checkpoint, Mobילאיי, and many other global innovations all have in common? The answer is simple. All of them have emerged from a tiny country in the Middle East, surrounded by enemies with only 7 million inhabitants. Join me to understand what makes Israel the world's #1 startup nation, long before much bigger players like Germany, the UK, France, China, Russia, Japan, or Canada. What secret makes Israel's high-tech industry so dominant for investors around the globe, attracting billions of dollars year after year, and allowing young Israelis to fulfill their exit dreams? I'm Lary King. Today we have a special guest with us, Gil Rosen from Israel. Gil is married, the father of 3, plus 3 cats and 3 dogs. He was born in Japan, grew up in Israel, and then returned to London and Japan. Most recently, he returned from Berlin, where he set up a European virtual mobile phone company for Deutsche Telekom, and was the founder and head of AT&T's International Innovation Center in Israel. Currently, he is the Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer for Bebzek. Welcome to Los Angeles.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
What's special about Israel as a startup nation?
That whole thing that happened over the past 70 years called Israel is kind of American, and that creates a state of mind that is perfect breeding ground for innovation. You know, what is innovation? It's making the impossible possible. And it's looking at things that other people don't consider to be doable and making them doable. It's about somebody getting an attitude and just doing it. And
Did it borrow from Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley, when we started, and I say we, literally 1948, wasn't there, right? So I think the Israeli ingenuity and the drive and the charisma is something that's created in the system that we have in the country that by now is almost like a very oiled machine. 20 years ago there was an information system revolution, but before that it was about medicine, it was about agriculture. Israel always took the energy, the positive energy from the creation of Israel, the defense of Israel, the building of Israel, and put it into industry.
Now you worked international organizations. You worked for in Japan, England, Germany, and the United States.
Right.
Do you feel Israel thinks differently from them? How is Israel different from the countries we just mentioned in the area of innovation?
So, take any country in the world that's probably there for 100, 300, 1,000 years if you're talking about England, Japan, you know, thousands of years. What comes with that is a culture. Culture makes people think in paradigms. And paradigms sometimes limit innovation, because you think in a certain way. Israelis are, you know, we might be one of the oldest tribes, ancient tribes in the world, but as a nation, we're fairly young. And if you look at our nation, I call it the blender nation. Right? We're a blend of a lot of cultures. We have, you know, I'm of German-Austrian descent, and there is a Polish descent, and there is Iraqi descent, and there is Moroccan descent, and everything is in a very small place. And you put everything in a blender, there's no one cultural paradigm that stops people thinking in certain formats. If you want to do something in Germany, there'll be a process of making things happen. In Israel, you can grab somebody in the corridor and you say, hey, let's do that. And things happen because there isn't like a formal way of doing things. In the Asian culture, I've been in meetings with 10 people. One person speaks, the most senior guy in the room, right? And the other ones just listen, and they don't say anything that's counter to whatever he said, even though they might think it. In Israel, it doesn't happen this way. It's like you go to Israel and you try to look for a line of people waiting in a queue, a line. You won't find it because people line up on sideways because we're impatient. But we're impatient, I think, in a positive way. If you go into one of my team meetings, you'd think that we are screaming at each other, that we're, you know, there's hate, there's animosity. But in actual fact, there's a lot of passion.
What would you say, as of right now, is the most important development in innovation? Is it the cell phone? Is it still the cell phone?
You know, I think that even before I talk about the technology, I want to talk about the era we're in. The era we're in right now is unlike any other era in the history of mankind. Things happen so fast that you cannot predict them in a linear fashion. 1 year ago, Nintendo launched a game. After 3 weeks, they had 20 million users walking around looking for invisible Pokemon, in the streets. Airbnb, a couple of guys in a flat, 8 years later, as big as the Hilton. You want to take a taxi today. You don't take a taxi. You take an Uber, you take a Lyft, you take a Via, you take a Get Taxi. Industries are being disrupted. Now, everything has happened on top of us. But we have had, as a communication company, to keep up and invest in the infrastructure in order to make all these apps and services happen. What's really exciting for me over the past 2-3 years, and especially in the last year, is that there's a new revolution. And the new revolution is called Internet of Things. Now, the Internet of Things is about things other than the cell phone, other than the computer, other than the tablet being connected to the Internet. And all of a sudden, my house is smart. All of a sudden, my city is smart. And we at Bebzek have made this our strategy to allow this to happen.
Tell me about smart homes. Like what is my home going to look like in 10 years if I'm still around?
10 years ago, we had our Nokia or Motorola, right? And it was a miracle for us. We said, hey, we don't need more, right? It's smart. We have a phone. And if you look back at those smartphones now, you say, hey, it's a brick, right? It's just a dumb talking device. And in 10 years, when you look back at your house today, you will say, hey, it's just a brick. It's just not reacting to me. It doesn't know if I've been in the living room. It doesn't fix the climate for me. It doesn't act differently when I go. It doesn't save my energy. So houses, like the entire environment, like cities, we hope, will react to the people around them. If an elderly person doesn't get out of bed and go into the living room, it might be a problem. Now, it's not about installing cameras. It's just motion sensors. And the house learning your behavior patterns. And if something is out of your behavior pattern, then the house sends an alert to whoever. Billions of dollars are spent today on home care. People on visitations. It's not necessary. The house can alert whoever that the person has not got out of bed.
So the house is my total servant.
Your house will be personalized. It will react to you. But it starts with security. People will always want to be secure. And then it goes to lifestyle. Air conditioning, boiler, the right temperature, lights, energy saving.
This is already in the works.
This is already launched in the works, and it's just going to get better.
I knew Steve Jobs, interviewed him when Apple started. Do you think if he were alive, he'd be surprised at all of this?
Being an innovator, I call it being a salmon. What do fish do? What do these salmon do? They swim upstream, right? And when they go upstream, bears try to get them out of the water. Innovators do what they do because they have this drive. And I think Steve Jobs, he had, in many points of his career, many people against him, right? But he continued because he was the king salmon, right?
So what do you say finally to young innovators?
So before you even get started, I would say look inside and think if you're salmon or something else, and most important, make the world a better place.
Do you think it's inborn?
That's the big...
genetic or environment?
It's a combination, most likely. It's a combination.
Great pleasure meeting you.
Likewise, Larry.
Gil Rosen.
Thank you.
What a guy.